TT's one podcast.
In one room.
Yeah, first time ever. We are on episode 31, and today we are going to be discussing cues. We might get a bit confusing between looking there and looking at each other, so it's like you're the third person here. So we are going to be going into a bit of in-depth conversation about the use of cues and I think more of the level of cues.
Yeah.
Because even the other day we just discussed visual, like actual physical, and like hearing it.
Yeah, just the application of it. I will say from the bounce, you look a hell of a lot better on a camera screen than you do in real life. So we might not do this all the
I
time.
look slightly bigger though on this one, so it's fine.
That's right. Everything about me is not to normal size. I'm usually massive. Definitely not.
So for me, the use of cues and the amount of cues will be down to the exercise and the actual client that I have, whether it's a beginner or someone advanced. But even then, it's the actual scale of what I'll use. And if someone's coming in and doing like a deadlift in comparison to like a lat pull down, obviously it's completely different movements, but the actual amount of cues and the use of the cues. So we said even the other day about using like comedic cues.
Yeah, I mean, like, the use of cues is always going to be specific to, like, people to people, person to person. Like, one thing might work for another, might work for someone else, then might not even work for someone at all and stuff like that. So it all comes down to even like the relationship you have with the client or person and stuff like that. But we all have like fan favourites.
Oh yeah.
So like when it's like deadlifting, it's like, right, push the floor down. Imagine someone's grabbing you by the scruff of the neck and drying you up. There are common cues that you will hear that trainers will commonly use because it makes a hell of a lot of sense to use them. But then sometimes like you'll have a good relationship with a client, or they'll just understand your kind of terminology, and you'll use something different. So, for example, when it comes to, let's say, a lateral raise, I use break and baguette.
Yeah.
Which is, I remember when you looked at me and you just thought, what fucking idiot. Like, who comes up with something like that? But it makes a lot of sense. And now, like, I get videos sent to me of people baguetting, like a French baguette, and doing like a lateral raise. But it makes a lot of sense, like, in that kind of sense. So it could be as proper as you want to be or as silly as you want to be. So the idea of a cue is ideally just getting you to do the movement that we want to do correctly. So it shortens the distance between the actual movement and the vocabulary that is used to actually do it.
Yeah, because like I've actually gone into the consideration of just doing actual movements with a client, but then actually watching them do it first. Because movements like the deadlift are so complex that if they've done it before and they know the general gist of it, I'm not going to come in and be like, right, here's 10 different cues that we need to put in straight away. Like, we're going to see what is actually in there and implemented that's actually correct, and then make the tweaks to what we need to, but then break it in like week by week. Obviously, making sure that they're not going to get injured because they're doing something that bad, then I'd just completely regress the movement.
But even still, like, we all get into that bad habit of we might teach someone completely new a new movement, and then we give them 6 or 7 new cues to think about. And then you can see in their head, they're just like, you can see math symbols just coming out of their eyes and stuff like that. It doesn't help out. So, like, I try to limit as much as I possibly can to all cue-ins.
Yeah.
So, maybe 2 or 3 at first, see how they get on with that. Because obviously, like, let's say it's a row, there are loads of different things I'm going to be looking at. So I might see, like, right, are they even actually in a good position to row? Are they then maybe putting their shoulders in the right position? Are they putting their elbows into the right position? Are they engaging the muscle when they're doing it? There's all that to consider, right? So if I'm putting, and that's my level of thinking, to a client, they just want to row.
Yeah.
Like, if I just put that kind of thinking on them, it's going to confuse the hell out of it because they don't think the exercise is the same as me. Like, you'll know, when, like, you've spoken to me so many times, how many times when you've asked me a question, and instead of answering it straight, I've just gone around the houses. That's what I'm like with clients, because I almost reverse engineer everything that I kind of say to get to a point. But that might take half an hour when really the answer is one word.
Yeah.
But it's just how I work, and it's how I try to teach all my clients and work.
But I think that's the biggest way to teach. It's not just the implementation of just saying shoulder back. It's like understanding why we do the shoulder back and how that's going to relate to the actual movement as a whole. There's no point just being like, oh yeah, we're going to do this. It might not make sense, and you're just going to be like, but I'm rowing. Why does it matter where the shoulder is in this position? Like, everything. If we're doing that, are we in the best position to then go and start the row again because we're going to go like this?
Yeah. Like, joint position matters when it comes to muscle activation. Like, but without going so much on that topic, the whole point of cueing is to get the right intent with the exercise. So a good exercise I can think off the bat is a death drop to a drop jump. Like, two different exercises. So two completely the same movement where you're coming off the box and you're pretty much trying to land on the ground and then jump back up. But they've got two different intents. One's you're trying to get as much output as you possibly can, so you're staying longer on the ground, creating more force to propel yourself as high as you can. Obviously, that being death jumps. And then drop jumps is how quickly can you get yourself on the ground, react, and spring yourself up. So how quickly can you apply that force? So there's that consideration of that as well and stuff like that. But I think if you're someone who's very new to movements in general, and like we're teaching you a hinge, for example, it's a very complicated thing. So the best thing to do is start off with familiarizing them what it kind of does. So like, right, you do this movement in a way when you're sitting down. Like, this is a safer way of doing it when you're leaning over. You don't want to lean over like this. You try to lean over like this. And explain to them, like, if they maybe not get it straight away and stuff like, remember, a lot of stuff we're doing in the gym, as much as we're trying to apply it to get a better advance within life, we don't particularly put that intent into everyday movement. Like, seated down, again, we'll use that as an example. Like, whoever hinges himself back in a nice controlled manner to sit down, I don't. I flop on the ground. I'm just like that, I'm just going to get myself into that seat, comfy down, get me through, and away I go. Yeah. Like, there's so much to consider about movement. And I was having this conversation with another client of mine the other day, and it's like, a lot of these so-called rules that we have within training are made up by us. Our body doesn't know these rules. Our body doesn't have a clue why we want to get into this position. Yeah, there's formats, there's reasons why we do it. There's studies that have shown, like, right, doing a row in this position and doing it into that position changes the ultimate result. But things like squat depth, like mobility, stability and stuff like that, like, there's some things in there is man-made. And it's no wonder that so many people get confused when it even comes to stuff like that.
Well, fun enough, I was going to bring in, like, the use of our terminology, because, like, I'm very, very, very guilty of, like, using big words. To a sense, is that's what I know, but then also to the fact that, like, I forget that sometimes people don't understand what I mean when I actually say it. So, like, even, like, I did a prone cobra with a client the other day, and it's like, realistically, the position is quite weird, but if you explained it in the way that you literally just, you turn your thumbs out, your shoulders go backwards. Yeah. I'm not going to be like, oh, they externally rotate, lift the
even the name, the prone cobra, like, I mean, when someone says cobra, you just think of snake. Yeah. It's just like,
but then what?
And we all fall down in this as coaches. Like, we've got to realise at times that we're not our clients. We live in their environment of fitness, so we apply ourselves to doing everyday things. And almost because we talk to other coaches about it and stuff, like, we get into that language very easily. So then when we're talking to Brenda and stuff like that, who have got, like, grandchildren and just wants to move better because her hip's been killing her, like, she's not going to understand terms like that. So it's just really good to be able to get into such a basic level of cueing that really benefits them. But as well, it benefits me because I can't say anything more than 3 syllables. So it's a win for me, really.
Because I've literally gone through cues, and it's like, it's all well and good telling it and demonstrating it, but the client doesn't move potentially how me and you would move. Yeah. So I've done a sit-up with a client, or an isometric sit-up, and it's like, yeah, the cue's great, but, like, they don't know the distance. They see you do the distance, but they're just like, what does that mean for me? And I've literally gone, and the back extension, like, this and this needs to be round like this, and then we're moving through that point, but physically going to the client and being like, this is the point that we're actually moving around.
Yeah, and that's another point in cueing. Like, there's verbal cueing, but But there's also, just making sure my screen stays on board there, but there's also like physical touch, which is also a cue as well, like that mind-muscle connection. People, I know we're going back to a row because it just makes sense, but if people go into a row, like, they haven't engaged that lat before. Some people don't have a clue that that's there.
Yeah.
So when they're just rowing, they're rowing with their arms. But then when you tell them to, like, right, imagine squeezing like a newspaper in between your arms and rubbing it. Like, do that and then pointing at the muscle you're working at and engaging it through that. They're like, right, I'm starting to get it now.
I've even used the application of putting a bit more force through the elbow. Obviously, I was doing a cable row, so like you'll have it at gym, etc. But going through the application, being like, right, what I want is a force being applied here. Yeah, exactly. If you're watching a video, then actually, like, are we driving this in the way we want to, and are we actually just not actually putting the force in, and we're wasting it in other points? And it's not until the client's like, oh, actually, I feel that, and I have to go through the conversation of being like, I literally sometimes at the end of sets just go,
yeah,
because I don't know what goes on inside a client. I don't know what they feel. Like, I'll to a certain extent, I'll see like muscles moving and operating, but I can't physically be in there knowing how the movement feels for them, if they're comfortable or uncomfortable. If they're really uncomfortable, I'll see it on the face, and if they're fatiguing, I'll see it on the face.
Yeah, but I've had some clients where they look like they're on the near drop of death, and they're just like, I ask him, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being highest, how hard was that for you? I think that's 5. I probably can go a little bit more weight. So I'm like, it looked like your head was about to blow off, mate.
You made it look completely the opposite.
But then the vice versa, like, people look easy and they'll come up to me and go, that was so hard. Like, bloody hell.
Yeah.
And even like Q's not always us from coaches to client. It's vice versa. Like, they can it's a pure, it's communication, and communication is massively important within training.
Yeah.
The communication you have with yourself and the communication you have with the people around you and stuff like that. So if you are working with another personal trainer, another coach or something like that, like, make them aware, make them really aware of what you're like, stuff like that. If you're trying to get a row and trying to engage lat or anything like that, but you can't, but you're feeling your front shoulder, tell him that.
Yeah.
Or tell her that.
Well, it's like injuries as well. It's like I've never broken a bone, like, but I'm not going to know how that's going to apply in terms of a pain, or even if it's to something that's been a 2-year-old injury, until a client physically tells me. Obviously, I'll work to the best capability in terms of programming and actually doing the work to make sure that they're getting the best results with the least amount of pain. But I don't know what goes on, like, in the joints, in the muscles, in your own head, because we could even get down to the perception of, like, how you deem pain and fatigue, because it's like the David Goggins 40%, isn't it? It's like, when you think you're at the end, you're actually only about 40%, but then.
Yeah, but even still, like that, like, is that even the case just because he told us, or is it something that's actually believable?
But
like, you hear so many stories about it, like people breaking limitations even though they're physically on the edge of, like, their pain limit.
But their pain limit.
But that's it. It's very individual and stuff like that. The way I handle pain will be completely different hand to yours. We'll all have trigger points. Like, I'll feel like, for example, some people who can feel hamstring burn like from an order and be like, no, okay, I'm about it. And they'll come to me and I'll just like whimp about it. I'll cry from the moment I do any kind of Nordics. And pretty much most of my clients who do Nordics with me don't enjoy it one little bit as well. But there's some people who are just like, yeah, I'm not bothered by it.
But it's also, what are they used to? So it's funny that we're saying cues as in what we're doing to prep a client to do an exercise, but it's also the cues of actually giving feedback after an exercise, which could then affect the cues of the future.
On the next exercise, yeah.
Because it's like, if you're doing
it's constantly evolving, and the levels of cues as well is going to be completely different from person to person. Like, you might come in with your first session and be like, right, I just want you to imagine you pressing the floor down. But then someone who's been training for years and stuff like that's like, right, I want you to externally rotate your hip, dorsiflect the ankle, and push drive down. Like, it's too, like, you're looking at me like, dorsey, what? But that's it. It's good. It's different person to person and stuff like that. So without lumbering on about it, is it's very important. It's extremely important that you get that language sorted out and stuff like that.
Well, me and Zach spoke about it because this is the Saturday after we recorded some videos last Saturday, and he was on about it. It's like, yeah, there might be certain terminologies that we use that might be too basic for some people and too advanced for other people. So it's quite a big window, and you've got like the two circles, and you've got to try and find that middle ground where they cross over.
And that middle ground changes and develops over time and stuff like that. So
it's all well and good having notes written down. Like, I'm starting all mine up now, but I know that certain times I might have to be like add a little bit more, just so the client gets the understanding of it.
Yeah.
Just because they might be like, oh, well, I don't feel this in my lap. I feel it like more on my shoulder. And I'm like, well, so it's definitely not right. But then that's when we get like the feedback response. Like we said earlier, like if it's to a certain extent, if we were doing a one-to-one, obviously that was discussing online kind of prospect. But a one-to-one basis, we know and we can see, be like, oh, your shoulder blade's coming round. So we're actually getting in a comfortable position, whereas we're not resetting and actually doing the row. Yeah. And that's when you're like, oh, I actually feel this in my rear delt more than my lat. I wonder why.
Yeah.
Do you see this? And then if you record it back, like I'll do that a lot, and I'll record a set for a client, not for like my own benefit, like to post it online, just so they can see, and like little tools of like putting.
I think visual EQing is a massive one. We've talked about the physical touch and the wording of it, but actually seeing yourself perform a movement, it puts yourself in a bit more perspective, and seeing you from like the eyes of the first person. Like once you see yourself more in third person, and you start seeing things like, yeah, I probably could try this, or I can try that, or oh yeah, maybe the ways I'm looking is forcing my body to go into that direction. It just changes the whole perspective of all the stuff like that. So even just recording yourself doing an exercise,
to a certain extent, you might not even know you're doing it wrong. Because like I've done tricks before where I've got like a resistance band, and like on the leg press, if they're lifting the glutes up, I'll like get them to physically sit on it, and then apply a bit of tension, and then they will know that they have to keep their hips and glutes pinned down. And if that band comes out, they know something's wrong. And then the same with like doing a squat, I'll put bands under the heels, not to like an extent where it's going to throw them off, but if they're like internally rotating or externally rotating, and the tension comes off where the band is, they know, oh, something's not right there. So I need to physically like be aware of how I'm moving and use something like a video to be like, oh, this is what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah, and sometimes like even as coaches, we'll just miss something. It'll just be like a split second where like either the spine's moved or the pelvis has moved or something else has moved, and we've just missed it completely.
I think it's just important to consider that obviously the considerations of fatigue and everything else that's going to happen within a set is also going to be a cue that be like, if we get to a point where we're doing a deadlift and then we're like really solid over upper body, like chest up, shoulders back, and then we get to the end and we're like, oh, fatiguing a little bit, and we do this.
Yeah.
It's going to happen if you're fatiguing.
Yeah, but also as well, like, even regarding with a deadlift and stuff like we haven't got, opposed to our lower limbs, we haven't got as much muscle mass up top compared to down there. They're all smaller individual muscles compared to like the quadriceps and the hamstrings. So there's that to consider as well. Like there will be weaker points within people to people, so that's being aware of that. But I think the best way to get you to understand more when it comes to cueing and understanding everything is knowing the movement itself, understanding how things move. Obviously, I'm not asking the client to get the anatomy board out and learn the 4 bloody muscles of a quad or something like that, or the stuff like that, but having a better understanding of how your body works will ultimately indicate how you move and stuff like that.
How your body works, not how the body works as well. But like
exactly. It's very specific. Like I think someone came up to me and stuff like that, and they were doing. I think it's a detoxing where what's the word where someone will actually go and see someone where they've had the skin shredded off them and stuff like that, and they've seen the actual inset of a muscle. Obviously, if a dead person, obviously.
They've seen like a cadaver or something.
Yeah, something like that. And then they were like, this guy hasn't got a pick minor. So, obviously, we're not going to 100% know ever until someone like opens us up to go, right, well, this is the way that your bodies are, you're 100% of your body's made and stuff like that. But understanding again just the general principle of how a body kind of moves gives it better. But you are right, it is pretty much how your body moves. Like people have different limb length, people have like different bone structures, different muscle length, all that kind of stuff. And it's not something that we're going to 100% know, unless again we cut ourselves open and find out that way, which I hope you guys don't do. But if it was one thing I'd probably say to take away from this podcast is just kind of just take the time to learn the movement and how that implicates into how the body moves and stuff like that. But yeah, without kind of going on about it, I think we've pretty much covered everything we wanted to talk about when it comes to Q.
I think it's 20 minutes?
Pretty much, we'll find out in a bit. But yes, guys, if you've enjoyed this episode of the Two PGs One podcast, I know it's a short one, but we wanted to get straight to the point with it. Also, as well, if you like this format where we're face to face and we're talking to each other like a conversation, don't look at me like that. Then let us know and stuff like that, and we'll try to get a little bit more face to face. We are trying to get a little bit more people on board so we can have different perspective on the podcast instead of just listen to us two babber on like so. Roundtable and stuff like that. So that might be interesting and stuff. But right, guys, if you guys have listened to this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you give it 5 stars with any type of reviews, hopefully positive. And if you're on the YouTube channel, if you've listened to the video, make sure you give a like, share. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace out.